Dan Wheldon was an IndyCar driver who competed in the series from the early to the late 2000s, but that's not his entire story. He began racing in go-karts at just the age of 4 and quickly progressed from there. But the funny thing about that is he didn't start racing competitively until the age of 8 due to age restrictions. At first this was just for fun, but by the time we reached the age of 17, he's already progressed to car racing. He won a Formula A championship in 1995, but didn't have the necessary funding to further his career in the United Kingdom. His main rival during that era was none other than future world champion in Formula 1 Jenson Button. In January of 1999, he had flown to Indianapolis for some test sessions with a few Indy Lights teams. By the time we reached 2001, he was already in it. 2001 saw him notch 7 podiums and 12 starts along with 2 wins, while also winning Rookie of the Year and finishing runner-up in the standings. Wheldon at first wanted to land a seat in kart, but when that didn't go through, he ended up going over to their rivals, the IRL. He scrounged up enough capital by the end of the season to land a 2-race deal with Panther Racing, one of the best teams in the IRL at the time. His IndyCar debut took place at Chicagoland in 2002, and what's funny about that is his other teammate, Sam Hornish Jr., would be a part of the closest finish in IndyCar history. Wheldon was in the back end of that main pack and ended up P10. 2003 would be a lot different.
Brian Beinhardt, whoa! Yep.
And Wheldon upside down.
Well, this changes the whole complex of the race, Paul. They're going to have another restart. Dan Wheldon is a lucky guy.
Lack of funding prevented Wheldon from starting the 2003 season, but when Dario Franchitti broke his vertebrae, he was called up anyways. The transition was pretty tough as he only podiumed once in 14 starts. The growing pains came at first, but Dan Wheldon and Andretti Green Racing were about to be on a 2-year tear from 2004 to 2005. In just the 3rd race of 2004, Wheldon scored his first career IndyCar victory at Twin Motegi, while also scoring 2 more at Richmond and the Old Nazareth Speedway. With 11 total podiums, he wound up finishing 2nd in the championship to his teammate Tony Kanaan. With a season like that, Dan Wheldon was definitely considered the championship favorite heading into 2005.
Coming out of turn number 4, this will be Dan Wheldon's 4th career win, and Sam Horn is trying to get it right. Your winner, Dan Wheldon, picks up the victory.
The driver is one thing, passing is something else, and again, he may be conserving some fuel, as you seem to indicate, as he comes onto the runway the last time, and there is the checkered flag, and Wheldon takes the victory. Kanaan goes 2nd.
At the 2005 Indy 500, Wheldon, at the time 26 years old, became the first Englishman to win the race since Graham Hill in 1966. Driving in a car co-owned by Michael Andretti, who competed 14 times in the 500 without ever winning, Wheldon gave his boss the ultimate vicarious thrill.
The checkered flag is out in Indianapolis, and the pubs are open in the UK. Dan Wheldon has just won the Indianapolis 500.
But Wheldon's victory was more than overshadowed. It was eclipsed by the achievements of Danica Patrick, who was racing in her first 500 and who became the first woman ever to lead the race for so much as a lap, eventually finishing 4th. In the wake of the Danica deluge, Wheldon wasn't shy about pointing out who'd finished first.
White flag is out. Number 26, Dan Wheldon, out in front. He's got to bring this thing home. The 27-year-old from Emberton, England, looking for his 5th IndyCar win of the season. It is Wheldon to the line. Let the celebrations begin in the UK. Your lad, the Indy 500 champ, is back home in victory lane. Wheldon, 5th win this season, ties him with Hornets for the most wins in a season.
Will the drafting work and overpower the Honda power that's on the low line? We'll have to see.
Chicago breeds close finishes, and they are going to make it yet another one. It's Wheldon on the inside, Castroneves on the outside. Somebody wake the queen, because Dan Wheldon just walked away with the checkered flag.
That was unbelievable.
The pride of the UK racing community has done it again. Dan Wheldon picks up his 6th victory on the year.
His season was so good, as a matter of fact, that he ended up clinching the championship one race early. Of course, you don't gloss over his Indy 500 win, that being the first of his career, and you have one of the most dominant performances in IndyCar history. 17 starts saw him score 6 wins along with 9 podiums, but his time with Andretti Green Racing would come to an abrupt end, and for good reason. Towards the end of the 2005 season, he had already signed a deal in principle to drive for Chip Ganassi Racing. The relationship started off in the best way possible, helping the team win another Rolex 24, and when you fast forward a month later, in the season opener at Homestead, he would win for the second season in a row in a close, nail-biting side-by-side finish with Helio Castroneves. You want to talk about feeling like you're on top of the world. Wheldon went from winning the IndyCar Championship a season prior to landing a new deal in a better ride with Chip Ganassi, not only winning the Rolex 24, but also winning the IndyCar season opener a month later. It seemed Wheldon was destined to go back-to-back, but actually that wasn't the case. He still put up a very solid season, finishing runner-up in the standings. He was one of 4 drivers still in championship contention by the time we reached the season finale in Chicagoland. Even though he won the race and tied Hornish in points, he lost to him on a tiebreaker because Hornish had the most wins. 2007 saw him win the Homestead opener for the 3rd season in a row. However, he wasn't up to his championship form, and that season was known mostly for drama anyways.
Nothing, because he doesn't have an answer.
She's just being Danica.
He doesn't have an answer. He came down into me.
I'm sure she's just feeling the pressure of not winning races, and you know, her teammates are.
If you get past, you get past.
And here comes Marco. Oh, look out! Airborne! Franchini's upside down. Dixon is involved. The wheels touched. Wheldon is involved.
Airborne up here, got up into the pit. We got him coming down.
Even though he finished 4th in the standings, the season was pretty much overshadowed by the Danica fiasco and also the Michigan incident. IndyCar hasn't gone back to Michigan International Speedway since. 2008 saw similar performances again. For the 5th consecutive year, Dan Wheldon scored multiple wins in a season, but this would be the last. Unfortunately, towards the end of 2008, his performances began to diminish. As he started out as a championship hopeful, by the time he get to the end of the season, he only scored 1 podium in the final 9 races. The performances with Chip Ganassi in the Indy 500 weren't the best as well, with only a best 4th in 2006. Wheldon had planned to extend his contract, but when word got out that they were also speaking to Tony Kanaan, he felt betrayed and left immediately, and went right back to the team he started with, Panther Racing. His 2 full-time seasons with them produced mixed results. The duo became a really competitive pair in the Indy 500 for the next 2 seasons. They would finish runner-up back-to-back in 2009 and 2010, but the overall season performance was sorely lacking as they only achieved 4 podiums in 2 seasons, a far cry to the multiple win seasons Wheldon was so used to. With only best points finishes of 9th and 10th in 2 seasons and no wins, Wheldon and Panther Racing quickly ended their relationship after the 2010 season. He later filed a lawsuit against his former owner, claiming that his earnings were coming late in the already set contract, among other things, and an out-of-court settlement was later reached. In 2011, when Wheldon wasn't racing, he was pretty much doing it all, not only becoming the series test driver for the new chassis that was set to debut in 2012, but also doing some commentating on the Versus network. Racing full-time in 2011 was a whole other story. Rather than focusing on that, he was in several talks to race in that season's Indy 500. When another deal fell through, he ended up speaking to his good friend, former Andretti Green Racing teammate Brian Herta. A deal was quickly reached and a team for the 2011 Indy 500 was quickly assembled. Driving in a Dallara chassis from way back in 2003, Wheldon was fairly competitive for most of that day. But towards the end, it was apparent that Phil's strategy was definitely going to come into play in this season's Indy 500. In a sort of twist of fate, his former team with rookie J.R. Hildebrand were set in stone to win the Indy 500. Or so we thought.
Panther Racing, oh so good. They finished second here, twice here, they come again through the final 2 corners. J.R. Hildebrand. Careful of traffic. He's got to get around the lap. Traffic. 100 years. No! goodness.
Keep
Just
their
like
foot on the
Shane
gas.
Hackett. Dan Wheldon is going to win the race. That is unbelievable. Oh my goodness. Wheldon, after finishing second the last 2 years, wins when J.R. Hildebrand hits the wall coming out of 4. Outside lane is That was Dan Wheldon, if you didn't know.
Whether you want to view it as one of the greatest miracle victories in Indy 500 history or one of the greatest choke jobs, Dan Wheldon was now officially a 2-time Indy 500 winner. This was truly a one-and-done operation because after winning the Indy 500, his contract expired at midnight on May 30th. While he was commentating and testing out the new chassis, he ended up taking the challenge from Izod Indycar to try and win $1 million in the season finale at Las Vegas. IndyCar allowed 34 cars on track, and when it was apparent that these cars were not going to break away from each other, you just knew something bad was going to happen.
You're on board with him, and one thing he was worried about going into this race was all that dirty air created by 34 cars.
But right now, the position he's in, he actually has a small advantage because everybody else is opening the air up in front of him, and he... Oh, here we go.
Trouble, contact, and a huge crash. Oh, my. It looks like Dan Wheldon may be involved in it.
With all those cars not being able to get away from each other, the worst possible outcome had happened. A 15-car accident had occurred on just lap 11 of 200. Wheldon's car rotated and traveled parallel to the catch fence above the concrete wall. Unfortunately, a post penetrated the cockpit and struck the lower portion of the right-hand side of Wheldon's helmet. He was quickly extracted from his car and airlifted to UMC. After what felt like an eternity waiting on an update for good news, we would not get that. Randy Bernard handed down the final word hours later.
IndyCar is very sad to announce that Dan Wheldon has passed away from unsurvivable injury. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family today. IndyCar, its drivers and team owners, has decided to end the race. In honor of Dan Wheldon, the drivers have decided to do a 5-lap salute in his honor. It will take place in approximately 10 minutes. Thank you.
You gotta give the drivers a ton of credit for mustering up the courage to give Dan Wheldon a 5-lap tribute like that. Emotions were running high. Pretty much everybody wanted to get the hell out of there. The race is not recognized in IndyCar's record books, which is why every time you look up the 2011 season on Racing Reference, Kentucky will always be listed as the season finale instead of this. The cause of death was unfortunately blunt force trauma to his head. Living about 15 minutes from the speedway and watching this unfold live that day, this is without a doubt the most saddest thing ever witnessed at the speedway. Dan Wheldon's funeral took place in St. Petersburg, Florida, and attended by almost 1,000 mourners. The next day, IndyCar held their own public service for him in Indianapolis, attended by members of the motor racing community. To me, he's always going to be a personality that stood out. I never got much into IndyCar back in the early 2000s as a kid, but every time I would turn it on, he'd seem to catch my eye. And now coming up on the 10-year anniversary of his passing, and it still just does not register in my mind that he left us so soon. In 2012, Dario Franchitti had dedicated his Indy 500 win that season to him, even wearing his white sunglasses in victory lane. A memorial plaque featuring his likeness and career achievements was unveiled in St. Petersburg outside of the second turn of its street race in 2013. In 2016, a memorial plaque was set outside of Turn 2 at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. In 2019, he was officially inducted into the Indianapolis Motor Speedway's Hall of Fame. And finally, both of his sons, Sebastian and Oliver, also race, and are in fact so good that they are now development drivers for Andretti Autosport as of 2021. Both are only 10 and 12, so let's see where their careers progress as the future goes along. But as time passes, one thing remains for sure. Dan Wheldon's charisma, passion for the sport, and talent are never going to be matched again. This is a guy that could have had a major impact on the IndyCar today, but unfortunately we'll never know in what way that would have been. Dan Wheldon was only 33. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Flags Matter. Catch you next time.
Many people ask me why I always sign off till we meet again. Because goodbye is always so final. Goodbye, Dan Wheldon.